not just the popular gather and craft survival game format, but also added a surprisingly complex and equally bananas story featuring cannibals and mutants. With the immediate arrival of its long-awaited sequel, Sons of the Forest, comes not only the pressure to top the beloved experience of the original, but also to add some new and increasingly wild surprises.
It looks so good.
And based on the 5 hours that I've played so far, I'm not only excited about the sequel's potential, but also confident that End Night could revolutionize the survival genre.
I've already seen one thing that I'm gonna really like.
The Forest begins with a simple premise. You've crash-landed on a mysterious peninsula and begin your quest to survive at all costs. There was also the optional objective of finding your kidnapped son, a task that would take you down a wild and disturbing narrative rabbit hole populated by flesh-hungry mutants. Sons of the Forest largely shares the same setup, substituting your son for a missing billionaire. It's a basic idea, but one that allows you to jump straight into the action, allowing players who have no intention of progressing the rescue mission to solely focus on building their very own lakeside resort with some friends right away. Just like its predecessor, you can play, build, and cause chaos with 7 of your friends in co-op, but you can still see everything Sons of the Forest has to offer in single player. The big difference this time though, is that even when you play solo, you're not alone. Enter Calvin. At the very start of Sons of the Forest, you're introduced to Calvin, an elite soldier who not only survived the helicopter crash that stranded you on the island, but is also very much along for the survival ride as an...
Okay, I don't know if you see this right now, but Calvin is actually carrying some logs. So I am very much convicted of... Is that the right word? I think he's gonna help us build. I think we're gonna get the slave that I always wanted. Hooray for Calvin.
Companion. While Calvin has suffered some major head trauma that's left him unable to speak, his injuries have not, perhaps surprisingly, prevented him from being extremely helpful. In an apparent effort to replicate the multiplayer experience for solo players, Calvin will follow you around and respond to commands issued via a bunch of handy quick select...
Okay, we actually have exactly what I want. We can tell him what to do. Get logs and give to me. Get logs, drop here. Get logs and follow me. Oh my god. It's exactly what I needed. Oh fuck.
Options on a notepad. He'll take orders to see out your less than desirable busy work, such as chopping down trees and gathering logs.
He's a little bit like a zombie though.
The value of having an AI companion was immensely noticeable. There was a huge benefit to sending Calvin off to find resources, while my co-op partner and I focused on designing our structure. I'd regularly turn around to find a fresh pile of logs for our disposal.
Okay, one thing first. We can't play with just 3 people. We can play with actually 7 people, just like in the forest. And we additionally gonna have Calvin in there, so it's gonna be even better. It's gonna be even better.
Calvin already on his merry way to collect more. Not only will Calvin somewhat provide company for solo players, but he offers helpful, time-saving resources even when in a group, putting a significant dent in the busy work of a survival game. This affords more time to either sculpt a masterpiece or plow forward on the cannibal killing quest. Calvin has a mind of his own though, well, at least to some degree. He sits down to rest when he gets tired and seeks water when he's thirsty. He'll also become upset if you treat him poorly, which makes him less productive and thus decreases the value as a companion. And if you decide you're not interested in having a worker bee along for the ride, you have the option to disable Calvin in the most realistic way possible.
We can kill him
in the head and you'll remove him from your session.
No.
Permanently. You're limited to 1 Calvin per multiplayer session, so the dream of a legion of Calvins can't be fulfilled. But the developers assured me that there are other companions you can find as you progress, each with their own unique AI. During my playtime, I caught a glimpse of Virginia, a mutant with 3 arms and 3 legs. She quickly scampered once I approached her, and definitely had more of a skittish sensibility than Calvin. But the developers told me that she can eventually be recruited, and will become attached to you over time should you be kind to her. They compared her instincts to that of an elusive and independent cat, which stands in opposition to Calvin's lovable and obedient dog. The AI improvements aren't limited to just companions though. On our expedition we came across several groups of enemies, ranging from a cluster of cannibals to a mob of monstrosities, each demonstrating their own impressive decision-making abilities. It felt like my enemies were thinking and making active decisions based on not only my actions, but also their situations and environment. Particularly in first-person horror games, enemies generally have 2 modes of behavior, patrol and attack. But in Sons of the Forest, some foes would just be extremely wary and just interested in watching what I do, while others would charge in aggressively, only to back down when things didn't go their way. I saw
Damn, the
enemies
plants look so
consoling their
good.
fallen friends, changing their clothes depending on the
Yeah,
weather
that's Virginia.
conditions, and even
That's where
tried to
they let go.
destroy my newly erected home when my back was turned. It was clear to see that the enemy's brains were not only following coded rules, but also adapting their thoughts based on the external influences. The developers explained to me that certain enemies with leadership qualities can influence the decisions of others, and even promote ideas in their ranks such as religion.
Oh, there's
and
the
that
gun.
Each individual has their own tastes, desires, and proclivities.
Whoa.
From my small taste of Sons of the Forest,
Oh,
I
that
didn't
was a
really
nice
get a
death
sense of how
animation.
deep this system is and how much it'll affect your experience. But the teasers I saw filled my mind with dozens of possibilities. I saw enemies adapting to changing their ecosystem and weather conditions, which now cycle through seasons that change as you progress. I
We got seasons.
even accidentally triggered a war.
Look, there's Donna. If you want to switch in here right now, they're showing. Send me the link of the video after. Okay. I'm gonna do it when
After I
I've watched it.
stupidly opened the entrance to the game's complex underground cave network and released a faction of mutants into the domain of another tribe. My simple decision caused their living space to change and encouraging them to adjust their focus. And after that little taste of chaos, I can't wait to see how flexible this system can be. As you'd expect, the titular forest makes a return, and it looks better than ever. From
There's
the
a
complex
deer.
density of foliage to the gorgeous rainfall and beautifully lit cave stalactites
Looks
amongst
really
the hanging
good, man.
corpses and mutant fetuses, the graphical power on show here rivals the majority of AAA releases.
Fucking
it was
babies.
a joy to explore without even the slightest hint of repetition in its design. With a tease of bunkers, villages, and God knows what else in a world that's promised to be 4 times larger than the original, I can easily see myself getting lost and then sidetracked in the wilderness for hours on end.
4 times
But at
larger,
its
not
core,
5.
Sons of the Forest is a survival game, and
Ooh,
so
there-
when you're not exploring, there's a good.
That was a spider web.
But at its core, Sons of the
You see that on the right?
Forest is a survival game.
spider
And so
web.
when you're not exploring, there's a good
Ooh,
chance
scary.
you're building. The construction tools have been significantly overhauled for the sequel. Gone are the floating blue ghost building blocks, replaced by user-friendly, realistic presentation of wilderness carpentry. Instructions are more literal, and actions are contextual. Instead of just loading resources into a ghost version of the final product, you're now free to, with magnetic and snapping assistance, manually place logs and sticks in the direction that you'd like,
Oh,
allowing for a
damn.
complete customization of your structure instead of following a predetermined design. My partner, Calvin, and I immediately set to work on building a lakeside domicile of our own. And what began as a traditional design immediately blossomed when we realized the only limitation was our imagination.
They played
We're
it on
working every
PlayStation.
placement by hand, and thus the structural points present not only a decision, but an opportunity for expression. I was informed that the option of the more traditional blueprint builds is still there for the purists, but I found
Oh.
the DIY construction far more appealing
Awesome.
than the IKEA approach. Then, of course, there's the optional story to follow. From the teasers in the trailers, this is implied to be bigger and perhaps even crazier than the original, and hopefully continues directly on from the Forest's cliffhanger. But amongst the time spent constructing and fighting off hordes of cannibals, I didn't really get a sense of how the story was going to go beyond the initial premise. It did feel very familiar to the story of the forest though, which I guess makes sense in the term of dropping players right into the action. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't have concerns that it could potentially retread old ground. My hope is this simply serves as a jumping off point to go in some truly crazy directions.
Oh, some
and
new
it
people
develops
hanging.
a narrative through line from the first game that still feels cohesive.
Oh, the
but
deers
time
look
will
so
tell
good.
once I get my hands on the full game and manage to pull myself away from building a replica of the Ewok village and destroying the lives of the unsuspecting locals.
The crafting looked
Sons
really
of the
good.
Forest appears to evolve and build on every
Troubles.
aspect of its predecessor, with a focused goal of realism and
Ew.
developing a flexible ecosystem.
Oh,
and it feels
shit.
like the building blocks are there to create something truly special.
Oh, shit,
But
did
its
you see
killer
him eat the
feature is
fish?
the addition of impressively
shit.
sophisticated and smarter AI enemies and companions that could not only provide a huge leap forward for the series, but the survival game genre as a whole.
How much more do we have? Oh, it's almost ended. Fuck.
And if you like that video and want to find out more about Sons of the Forest, why not check out everything that we know so far? And for everything else Sons of the Forest, stick with IGN.
Oh boy, this looks more than good. This looks actually more than good.